God bless you. Hey, the black face of white supremacy. I worked hard for that title, brother. Did anybody see that baseball game last night? This man hit 3 home runs, pitched 5 1/3 innings, struck out 10 people. It was probably the greatest, not postseason performance in the history of Major League Baseball, the greatest game in the history of Major League Baseball, greatest performance. Now, I mention that because the man right now at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue is Shohei Ohtani, Michael Jordan, Tom Brady, and Tiger Woods combined. Because the job he's doing is so much more important. This is life and death. This is national security. This is a world where we are always on the brink of thermonuclear annihilation, and this man is at the helm, and God bless him. You know, as Tony mentioned, by the way, I briefly ran for president in 2024. I say briefly because I didn't make the debate stage in Milwaukee for reasons I won't complain about, at least not right now. And the primary reason, I told this to Mr. President in Mar-a-Lago when I ended my brief campaign, is I didn't run to displace him. I knew he would be the nominee. I wanted him to be the nominee. I expected him to be the nominee. But we were not talking about, as Tony said, the number one issue facing America domestically, which is the epidemic of fatherlessness. 40% of all American children today enter the world without a father in the home, married to the mother. And Barack Obama once even said, if you're raised without a father, you're 5 times more likely to be poor and commit crime, 9 times more likely to drop out of school, and 20 times more likely to end up in jail. Far and away the number one social problem in America. And you look at crime. Donald Trump is doing something about urban crime. He puts the National Guard in Washington, D.C. Immediately, homicide falls. Immediately, carjacking falls. Robberies fall. Disproportionately, the victims and the perps are the very black and brown people that Democrats purport to care about. I was on Charlemagne the God's show. Remember Charlemagne the God, the one to whom Joe Biden said, you ain't really black if you don't know whether you want to vote for me or vote for Trump? So I'm on his show, and he's complaining about racism, systemic racism, endemic racism, structural racism. They always have a bunch of different adjectives for it. And I told him that far and away, the number one problem was the epidemic of fatherlessness. 70% of black kids today enter the world without a father in the home, married to the mother. And consider this. Out of the roughly 15 to 20,000 homicides every year, recent years, half of the perps and victims are black people, even though blacks are just 13% of the population. Most of those, by the way, are committed by men. You throw out really old men who don't commit murder, really young men who don't, males who don't. You're talking about roughly 4% of the population committing almost half of the homicides in America. These young men do not have fathers. I said, and unless you're prepared to say that young black men are genetically inclined to commit more crime, please tell me what it is. He had no answer, because the answer is the epidemic of fatherlessness. The number one cause of preventable death for young white males in America is accidents, like car accidents, drug overdoses, or drownings. The number one cause of preventable death for young black men is homicide, almost always at the hands of another young black man. Now again, unless you're prepared to say black young men are just genetically inclined to commit more crime, please tell me what this is. And almost nobody has an answer who hasn't thought it through. The answer is what I said. There was a documentary on NPR, PBS, no longer paying for it now. And it was about this preserve in Africa, I believe it was in Kenya, where they were trying to preserve elephants. They were an endangered species at the time. They were so successful, they overpopulated. So they had to thin the herd. So they built these planes, these harnesses, to take them out and put them in other preserves. And the male elephants were so heavy, they decided to take the lighter elephants, the females, and the juvenile elephants. and they put them in other preserves. And pretty soon the other preserves noticed something. The juvenile elephants were beginning to be real aggressive, attacking rhinos who were on the endangered species list and attacking other animals. And they couldn't figure out why. And somebody said, well, maybe it's because there aren't any men. So they developed another harness heavy enough to bring the males in and put them in the same preserve that was having all this difficulty, and within a matter of months, it stopped. The same thing is going on here. Within a matter of months, it stopped. The best thing that we could do is somehow rain the inner city with a bunch of fathers. I did a documentary. You can see it for free on YouTube. It's called Uncle Tom, the Odyssey of the Black Conservative. And in it, we talked about how black people kept moving forward after slavery. In the wake of horrific Jim Crow, in the wake of cross burnings, black people kept moving forward. In 1940, 87% of blacks lived below the poverty line. 87%. 1960, 20 years later, that number had fallen to 47%. That's a 40-point drop in 20 years, the greatest 20-year period of economic growth in the history of this country for black people. Why? It was rare for a black kid to be brought into the world without a father in the home married to the mother. A strong belief in Judeo-Christian values, a strong belief in the principles of America, even as America was not applying these principles fairly to black people, and a strong belief in entrepreneurship. Fast forward, I've done a documentary called Uncle Tom 2, where I talk about how the civil rights movement has been co-opted by organizations like Black Lives Matter. On the Black Lives Matter website, they attacked the nuclear black family as a European construct that they thought was phony. Black Lives Matter is founded by self-described trained Marxists. Marx, by definition, did not believe in capitalism. He was an atheist who hated Jews. So this entire movement has now been co-opted by a bunch of people who are trained Marxists, Jew haters, atheists, who don't believe in the nuclear intact family, and it was embraced and endorsed by Barack Obama. Don't get me started. You just did. Barack Obama wrote, his first book was called Dreams from My Father, and it was a wonderful book. I'm not sure he wrote it. Seriously, Bill Ayers, the underground guy that in whose living room Obama launched his presidency, once bragged that he wrote it. I'm not sure that Obama did, but anyway, it was a very well-written book, and it was a very honest book, brutally honest. I think because he did not think he was ever going to run for president. He admitted he had done cocaine, he admitted a bunch of other things in it, but the book was primarily about the pain that he felt from not having a father in his life. His father was from Kenya, and he last saw Obama when Obama was 10 years old. So the whole book was about the angst that he felt for not having a father. In fact, he lied to his elementary school kids and said that my father was an African chieftain, that's why he wasn't around, because that's what it pained him. Jesse Jackson was raised in South Carolina. There's a book out of print now called Thunder in America, because that was a nickname that the Secret Service gave him when he ran for president. And his mother was a teenage mom who was impregnated by the married man who lived next door. So when Jesse Jackson grew up, this was rare, he was teased, Jesse ain't got no daddy, Jesse ain't got no daddy. Al Sharpton. Al Sharpton had a nice middle-class life until his father ran off with another woman, and then down to the ghetto he went because their finances cratered. Minister Farrakhan. Louis Farrakhan's mother was divorced from her husband and had a boyfriend and took up with the estranged husband again, briefly, got pregnant with Louis, didn't want the boyfriend to know, so tried to abort Louis with a coat hanger. My point is, these are four of the most prominent so-called black leaders, not a term I much care for, but so-called black leaders in America, all of whom either had no relationship with their father or a poor relationship with their fathers. And yet they don't talk about this issue. The issue for them is racism, racism, racism. Oh, by the way, and racism. And it is not helping. It is not solving the problem. It is not dealing with the problem. And it's furthermore a lie. There's a Supreme Court case right now, and by the way, but for 47-45, we would not have had the overturning of Roe v. Wade. There's a case right now that the Supreme Court is considering to overturn the way the Voting Rights Act has been used to artificially set up these majority-minority districts in the House. The assumption is that white people vote for white people, black people vote for black people, Hispanics vote for Hispanics, of course, which has been completely refuted in many recent elections, not least of which is Obama's own election in 2008. If the Supreme Court rules that race ought not be a factor in creating congressional districts, and I believe they will, and if they rule in time for the midterm elections next year, there could be more Republican seats, new Republican seats created than what they're doing in Texas and other states combined. There could be as many as 20. It will dramatically change the electorate if that happens. It would be an earthquake, and they are scared to death. The NAACP lawyer said he believes, he was arguing before the Supreme Court, that whites don't vote for black candidates whether they are Republican or Democrat. Really? Maxine Waters' district, by the way, is something like 57% Hispanic, maybe 35% black, the rest Asian and white, yet she got elected last time with 75% of the vote. So apparently non-black Democrats are voting for black candidates, but white Democrats won't vote for black candidates. Please explain to me somebody like Byron Donalds. Explain somebody like Wesley Hunt in Texas. Explain why they thought Kamala Harris could win. How insulting is this? Racism has never been a less important factor in American life than today. And all of this racism BS is pushed by the media. They give you the impression that, for example, let's take George Floyd. George Floyd died in police custody. We had 4 months of protests and riots starting in May of 2020. All over America, hundreds of cities, 2,000 police officers wounded, 35 people killed, $2 billion in insured property damage, another $1 billion or $2 billion in uninsured property damage. Why? Because of an assumption that what happened to George Floyd had to do with his race. I'm a lawyer. The most important part of a trial is your opening statement. Remember, the George Floyd or Derek Chauvin trial was on television. The lead prosecutor was a black man. He took pains in his opening statement to say that the police in general were not on trial. The Minneapolis PD in general is not on trial. This individual is on trial for what this individual did or didn't do to George Floyd. And Derek Chauvin was never even charged with a hate crime, not federal or state. However you feel about what Derek Chauvin did, and we could debate that, there is zero evidence that what the officer did had anything to do with George Floyd's race. Yet we had 4 months of protests because of the assumption that what happened to him had to do with his race, when there was no evidence of this. Now, of the tens of millions of people that went to the streets, including violence during those 4 months, I would imagine if you asked them to describe their political ideology, most of them would call themselves very liberal. There's a website called policemag.com. Policemag.com asks people who self-described as very liberal. I love your smile. Policemag.com asks people who self-described as very liberal, how many unarmed black men did the police kill in 2019? 50% of the self-described very liberal people thought the police killed 1,000 unarmed black men in 2019. 8% thought they killed 10,000. What, you ask, did the self-described just liberal people think? 39% of the self-described liberal people thought the police killed 1,000 unarmed black men in 2019. 5% thought they killed 10,000. The answer, according to the Washington Post database, 12. That's a bit of a gap, don't you think? That's because of the media. White cop, black person dies, they're all over it. Black cop, black person dies, nah. But if a white cop is involved in the arrest of a black person who dies, the media is all over it, giving you the impression that these people in the streets assume that what happened to George Floyd happens 3 times a day the whole year. Are you nuts? Are you kidding? Raise your hand if you heard about the name Damien McDaniel. Anybody? I got one hand. As we speak, Damien McDaniel is on trial for murder in Birmingham, Alabama, for murdering over 2 years 18 people. If convicted, he will be the most prolific serial murderer in the history of Alabama. Why do you suppose, as I said, he's on trial as we speak? Why do you suppose you don't know about it? It hasn't been covered in the media. Why hasn't it been covered? Damien McDaniel is black. Virtually every single one of the people he killed is also black. As a result, zero interest in this. This is how we are manipulated. This is how people are deceived. This is how people are indoctrinated because of things the media cares about, pays attention to, and ignores everything else, giving you the impression that racism remains a major problem in America when it's never been less insignificant. In 2008, when Obama ran, Gallup did a poll. On the Democrat side in the primary, there were 2 primary candidates, Obama and Hillary. On the Republican side, there were 2 primary candidates, Mitt Romney and John McCain. How many people, Gallup asked, would never vote for a black person for president, no matter how well qualified, whether he or she or they? It's a joke. 5% of Americans said they would never vote for a black person for president. 11% said they would never vote for a female. 24% said they would never vote for a Mormon. 42% said they would never vote for somebody as old as John McCain. Bottom line is, Obama had a lower threshold than they did. And now we're talking about systemic racism? Are you nuts? 2016, Baltimore, which, by the way, is a higher per capita homicide rate than Chicago. Chicago gets all the ink because it's a bigger city. Absolute numbers, more homicides. But on a per capita basis, New Orleans is more dangerous, Newark is more dangerous, Memphis is more dangerous. 2016, in police custody, a guy named Freddie Gray died. Remember that? He was in the police van, and they didn't strap him down. His head hit the side, and he broke his neck, died. State attorney brought charges against 6 officers, 3 of whom were black. The state attorney that brought the charges was black. A judge before whom 2 of them tried the case without a jury was black, found them not guilty. City council, all Democrat, majority black. The number 1, number 2 running the police department, black. The county superintendent of schools in Baltimore, black. The city superintendent of schools, black. The U.S. attorney at the time, Loretta Lynch, black. The president of the United States at the time, black. So all these people running the system, and you're talking about systemic racism? Remember when Obama got elected, Wanda Sykes said, "How are you going to complain about the man when you're the man?" Knock it off. You're not helping anything. You're making things worse. Second problem facing the black community, biggest problem by far, the unbelievably lousy education kids are getting K through 12 in urban America. I see I have 29 seconds, 30 seconds, so let me just wrap this up. There are 13 public high schools in Baltimore, all located in the inner city. 0% of the kids can do math at grade level. Chicago, 30 government schools, all located southwest side of Chicago. 0% of the kids can do math or read at grade level, which probably explains why they voted for Mayor Lori Lightfoot and Brad Johnson. I'm just saying. Last thing, I'll leave it with this. You know my father's story, never knew his biological father, left home at the age of 13, irresponsible mother. My last name, Elder, was not his last name. He never met his biological father. It was the name of some man who was in his life the longest. My father joined the Marines. He came out, couldn't get a job because they wouldn't hire him because he's black. Eventually started a little cafe near downtown LA. When my dad retired, he owned that property, the property next door, plus the home that we still have in our family. He was a millionaire on paper. Hallelujah. Lifelong Republican. My mom, lifelong Democrat. You should have been fly on the wall at the house. And my dad said this about Democrats. Democrats want to give you something for nothing. When you try and get something for nothing, you almost always end up getting nothing for something. Finally, he said this to my brothers and me: hard work wins. You get out of life what you put into it. Larry, you cannot control the outcome, but you are 100% in control of the effort. And before you moan or groan about what someone did to you or said to you, go to the nearest mirror, look at it and say, what could I have done to change the outcome? And finally, he said this: no matter how hard you work, how good you are, sooner or later, bad things are going to happen to you. How you deal with those bad things will tell your mother and me if we raised a man. God bless you all. Thank you so much for having me.